Hello, class, and welcome back to another lesson. So, I get the same questions all the time regarding public speaking, especially from a lot of introverted, nervous speakers. And one of the questions that I usually get is, how do I work on my delivery? How do I become more confident about what to say and things along those lines? But a lot of these questions, the problem with them is that they're not very detail oriented. For example, yeah, it's just very general. So, with that being said, because I don't have a lot of information to go off of, for this particular lesson, I want to just provide a very easy, easy way to practice your delivery when it comes to public speaking. So, I'm a big advocate of practicing, and for me, public speaking, it's not one of those things you can just get better without working off some technique or without having technique or without having some materials or resources to practice with. For example, if you want to get better at basketball, you can't just play basketball all of a sudden. You want to take time to practice your dribbling, your shooting form, playing with teammates, things along those lines. You need a basketball, obviously. You need a place to play as well as a court, right? You need those resources. And the same thing applies to public speaking. So for this lesson, I want to show you how to practice your delivery using something that we all have access to, which is YouTube. So, but more specifically, I want to show you how to practice your public speaking delivery skills using YouTube, but more specifically using TED Talks. Now, why do I choose TED Talks? Because it's pretty general, right? There's no specific reason. Aside from the fact that it's accessible to pretty much all of us. TED Talks is very much world renowned. Everyone knows what TED Talks is. Therefore, everyone should have access to TED Talks as well as YouTube. So, very simple. So, first, as you can see, if you're watching me on YouTube, you have the fortunate opportunity to kind of see what I'm doing. But for those that are listening, I'll try to explain it thoroughly and keep in mind that you are listening without having any visuals. So right now, as you can see, I'm on YouTube. All I did in the search engine was just type in TEDx Talks. So all I'm doing right now is I'm looking for a speech, but more specifically, a speech that I thoroughly enjoy, as well as me wanting to kind of practice that delivery style. So if I was just a beginner, what I would do specifically is I'd probably look through a speech that I like, find a video that I like, and once I do, this is what you do. So just for the sake of saving time, I've already prepped a lot of this. So I will click this video, which is called How to Get Your Brain to Focus. So I'm going to skip the apps because I already have it loaded up over here. So from this video, all you have to do is scroll down and you look for these three horizontal buttons next to the word save. You click that, you click the three buttons, and then you click open transcript. So unfortunately the video is a little cut off. Let me show you over here. And as you can see right here, voila. Now you have a transcript to the entire speech of this video. Great. So what I would do is I would copy and paste every single word, which I've already done, right? I would copy the entire transcript and I would put it on a clean Google Doc, which is right here. So again, as I said, I prepared this before. So obviously when you copy and paste this text, it's going to copy and paste probably the timestamp as well. But all I did was just clean it up, right? So make it look a lot more visually pleasing. So after you do that, you make it look visually pleasing. It's in paragraph form. This is your practice resource, which is called a transcript. And this is how I become a national award winning speaker for multiple years. You need resources to practice. You need material. Ideally, you need a transcript. So, what I want to clarify before we do practice our delivery is that notice that this delivery, which is a TED Talk speech, is more specifically geared towards prepared presentations in front of an audience with the specific goal of entertaining, right? because that's what usually TED Talks are. They're supposed to be entertaining. They're most likely informing you on a new idea, a new concept. But for the most part, it's kind of like a performance, right? A professional performance. So that is the context of this speech and this presentation. Now, not every single one of you is going to be doing those types of presentations at work or just whatever, right? But that's not to say it's not a useful resource, because you need something. Now, let's just dive into it. I can talk about this forever, but I don't want to ramble. I don't have much time, and I'm assuming you don't either. Okay, so as you can see in front of us right now, we have the transcript of the entire speech. Now, here's how you practice. First, you read it, right? A few years ago, I began to observe something in my own behavior that made me a bit uncomfortable. Okay, so the way I delivered it, keep in mind, I'm a lot more experienced. I try to I try to be a little bit more monotone and just be, yeah, but it's inherent in me. So what you want to focus on is you want to break up this sentence. Let's focus on this first sentence right now, right? How would you deliver this first line? So you have a couple things that you can do. First is you can actually watch the video and try to mimic the speaker and see how they did it, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to, right? You can do that if you're a beginner and you want to just kind of mimic someone else's style. But because I have my own style, I'm going to do it my way, right? So what I would do with this first sentence is, when I'm practicing delivery, if I want to see a punctuation, I deliver that punctuation. So what do I mean? So right here, there's a comma, right? So with commas, I like pausing for one good Mississippi, or pausing for one good second, right? Which a lot of people don't do. One mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to delivery, especially a lot of novice, nervous speakers, is that they don't deliver punctuation. They just speed read through the entire presentation because they want to get that horrifying experience over with. But if you're doing that, the audience can tell, and as a result will not care about what you're saying. So the first step is deliver punctuation. So let me read this sentence again. A few years ago, I began observing something ... Notice that little pause that I made for that comma, right after a few years ago. A few years ago, I began to observe something in my own behavior that made me a bit uncomfortable. Now, notice how I delivered that sentence. That overall sentence, most people, what they would do is they would speed read through the entire sentence. Here's an example of what they would do, or what you should not do. A few years ago, I began to observe something in my own behavior that made me a bit uncomfortable. Right? It's probably actually worse than that. But notice how there is no distinction of information. There's no separation of information. At this point, you're just reciting words. You're not delivering anything with intent. Now, the great thing about pauses and punctuation is that they are a clear indicator to you when you should pause, right? There's a comma for a reason. When you're writing, you write commas, right? Unfortunately, we live in the texting generation, so a lot of people forget punctuation. They just write. But that's not what you want to do when you want to be an effective communicator. Punctuation is key, not just in writing, but also delivering. Again, one more time, because I've noticed how I'm practicing it. I'm reciting the same line over and over and over and over again, so I can build that muscle memory, which is what you should do too. A few years ago, I began to observe something in my own behavior that made me a bit uncomfortable. Now, notice how I just recited that sentence again. Notice how I played with it. Did you see the differences between the way I just recited it and how I recited it a couple of minutes ago? For the previous sentence that I just cited or recited, I took a lot more longer pauses. Now, why did I do that? Because I'm just experimenting. Right now, since I'm in the beginning phases of working on my delivery, I'm experimenting with the length of pauses, when I should pause, which words I should evoke a lot more emotion. Right now is the fun part, right? I'm just kind of I'm developing my own style, which is what you should do as well, right? So what but my ultimate goal with this first sentence is I'm trying to paint a picture in your minds. So, because this first paragraph is telling a story, right? This is what this speech is trying to do for its introduction. It's trying to tell a story. So, how do you tell a story? You take time, you find pauses in between words to break up information so it is a lot more digestible for your audience. So, let me just do a quick read of the first paragraph. That might be helpful, so I can really hit it home. So, okay, so from the top. A few years ago, I began to observe something in my own behavior that made me a bit uncomfortable. And from the moment that I woke up to the end of the day, my life was a series of screens. I started the day with the thing that woke me up first thing in the morning, my phone. And so I sat there in bed watching various cooking videos on Instagram and bouncing around between a bunch of different applications. But then it was time to get out of bed and cook breakfast. And so the thing that I focused on in addition to the omelet in the pan was the iPad that was right next to the oven. And then it was time to do some work. And so I went to a different screen which was attached to another screen itself. All the while, this little devil on my wrist was tapping and beeping and blooping and distracting me as I was trying to get some important stuff done. But there was one particular offender out of all these different devices that I wasted more time on than anything else. That was this disasterly thing, my phone. Okay, so notice how I read it, but it was very choppy, right? Notice I had a lot of moments where I paused all of a sudden. I was unsure of what I was saying. That's because I wasn't familiar with what I'm actually reading. I'm literally just reading, which is probably a mistake that a lot of people make, that we all make, right? But the great thing about this practice session is that that's exactly what it is. It is a practice session. Now, this is one of the best ways to practice your delivery, practice your storytelling, and just work on how you flow sentences together. Now, if I were to be doing this for real, what I would do is I would reread this paragraph over and over and over and over again until it flows without those little hesitations, without those little unwarranted pauses. If I pause during a speech or during a presentation, it should be intentional. I'm pausing for the purpose to allow the audience to stop and think about what I'm trying to say or to have some time to digest information. So that's the great thing about just practicing on YouTube. It's very much this simple because the great thing about just using YouTube, but more specifically using TED Talks, is that TED Talks are speeches, they're formal presentations, they're performance presentations, right? So use transcripts, use speeches. You don't necessarily only need to use TED Talks. You can use articles, you can use novels, you can use prose, poetry, etc. But the main purpose to practice your public speaking delivery is you want to start with something, right? A transcript. And once you have the transcript, once you kind of re-edit it so it makes sense, you want to say the same lines over and over and over and over again. So you eliminate those small little hiccups in between sentences, which you heard earlier, right? When I was reading this paragraph for the first time, I was unsure. Like you heard it in my delivery, especially if you're a podcast listener. You heard those little hiccups that I made, which is very much it's inevitable. That's going to happen. And that happens, those little hiccups, when you're not sure what to say. While I was reading it, I wasn't sure what I was reading, right? Because my eyes are a little messed up right now. I've been staring at a screen all the time. So I was unsure. But the great thing is that I have this script. I have something to practice my delivery, which is what you should do too, right? And again, YouTube, you have so many different ways to practice. So, the reason why I suggest a TED Talks is because it is written in the form of a speech. Now, these speeches, you shouldn't, excuse me, these speeches aren't the most applicable to your workplace, right? Because for the most part, a lot of public speakers who need my assistance, they're more focused on just short, concise deliveries or short, concise updates during a business meeting. But that's besides the point, right? This speech is just there to help build muscle memory. You can choose whatever speech you want. You can choose whatever piece of literature you want. It does not matter. But it's what does matter is you taking words and practicing delivering them. That's what matters the most. There are a lot of different styles of presentations and a lot of different styles of just speeches or just communication. But what's most important is actually getting getting a transcript or getting words on a document or a piece of paper and reading them out loud. You can't get better at public speaking if you don't actually read something out loud. So you can figure out when to pause, figure out how to play with emotion, how to evoke emotion. And all of those things, for me, it's inherent now. So for me, because I've been doing this for so long, I don't really know exactly what issues you need help with. I don't know if that makes sense. When you've been doing something for so long, you almost forget what it means to be a beginner. So if you do have any additional questions, just let me know, ask. But if you want to get better, you have to have a transcript and read it out loud. I make people do this all the time. I don't care how bored they are. You need to sit your butt down and you need to practice. You need to deliver the same lines over and over and over again. And when I used to coach students to become national award winning speakers, I would make them do the same lines over and over and over again until they were perfect. If it didn't sound perfect, I'd make them do it again. And there were days where we would have 30 to 40-minute sessions. Like, you're not getting it down, so see me next week. Get it together, get it down, get better, right? So there's a lot of hard work and a lot of monotony when it comes to practicing, but those that are watching, you're willing to do it. If not, then why are you listening or watching this video, right? So again, this was another lesson. Hopefully it made sense. I kind of just freestyled it because, to be honest, I don't really have that much time. I'm busy. If it was helpful, hopefully it was helpful. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Okay. Take care.